Hello and welcome to Hops and Brews. This week,
It's very hot, it's summertime, we're speaking one of the most summerest of beers. Is that even a thing?
For an open window on a crafty world, Max and Chris from Ups and Brews. Ups and Brews. Welcome to Ups and Brews.
Alright, so this week we'll be diving into the world of Hefeweizens, wit beer, Weiss beer, white beers, wheat beers, however the hell you want to call them. It's almost all the same. Now, Chris, where is this style from?
It's actually from Germany. So, Hefeweizens, let's say it's the whites of Germany. Is that a proper way to announce it, Max? I think, yeah.
It's a little racy, but sure, yeah.
Yeah, so in Germany, of course, there's the Reinheitsgebot going on. If you haven't watched the Reinheitsgebot episode, go watch it now, then come back here so you can understand a little bit more of the history and where kind of like the cost behind brewing this beer comes from. Because history known in Germany, Hefeweizens were mostly brewed by people that were not richest, but that got a little bit more money because of the price of the ingredients used in the Hefeweizens. So of course it's dating back to the 1520s in the Bavarian area down south in Germany. Of course the style evolved through the years with the Reinheitsgebot, with different variations of the style at the same time. Me, myself, I know this style because there's a few good breweries here in Canada that has a nice Hefeweizens, and for me it was kind of like an introduction to the wheat beers outside of the German classics like the Blanche de Chambly. So I think it's a very, very nice way to start with wheats if you never drank one. So Max, like, what's the difference and how can you brew a wheat beer in the Reinheitsgebot territory?
Well, you can't. That's the essence of the initial law of the Reinheitsgebot stated that you had to use barley, water, and hops to brew your beer. Therefore, Hefeweizen should not have been a thing. Problem is that before that law, the nobility was actually they liked wheat beers. They liked the taste. They liked the flavors. They had a liking to it. Now, it's just because a law was preventing them from actually producing that beer doesn't mean they weren't going to have it. That's why nobility, rich people, could afford to either pay the extra taxes for it or just still do it, ignoring the law, which seems to happen in a lot of societies. As soon as you have a bit of power, a bit of money, you tend to be able to do whatever the hell you want. Now, with the change in the Reinheitsgebot that happened, I forget the year, but anyways, happened more recently, they changed it to malt, water, hops, and yeast. Yeast was not part of the original one because they didn't know about yeast. They knew that something happened, they didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
So with the difference being that it's not barley anymore, it's malt, meaning that you can use malted wheat or malted anything, really. So it kind of changed the landscape of brewing in Germany.
Yeah.
But Germans are very, they like their beers to be very neutral in general. I mean, lagers and pilsners are not the most hoppy beers or the most extreme beers, and everywhere you go, they tend to say they have the best version of the pilsner, the best version of the Hefeweizens. I mean, really, it tastes exactly like the other one, kind of. Little differences here and there. Some might be a little better, but very, very neutral. Yeah. Anyway, so the big difference between Hefeweizens and wit beer per se, or Weiss beer. So Weiss beers is the German version of white beers, of wheat beers. Generally a little more phenolic and estery. So phenolic meaning that you're going to have more clove in it, and estery meaning you're going to have a lot of banana. Now these beers are extremely yeast driven. That's kind of what will dictate the taste of the beer. It's not the hops, sometimes it's the malts. Naturally, you're going to have a very high percentage of wheat in those beers, but a very simple grain bill aside from that.
Yeah.
Generally, they're going to be white color, opaque, very hazy.
Nice fluffy
sometimes nice fluffy
like
edge.
For me, Hefeweizens, when you pour it, it's like yellow, tinty, big white fluffy head, and you get the cloves in there, bananas. It's very refreshing. You smell this like fresh spices in there. I think it adds a lot of character into one very simple beer, on my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. And well, that's the thing, is you're either team banana or you're not. Personally, I'm not really team banana. So I'm more a fan of wheat beers, which is the Belgian version of wheat beers. But I'm still, there's still some Hefeweizens that I do enjoy. Generally, they're a little more clovey, and the way you get clove in those beers is actually from the malts. So the yeast will take a certain acid that's created during the mash and transform it into phenolics, into clove aromas. So that's why Hefeweizens generally have what's called a step mash. So you're actually going to start your mash temperature lower, so around 45 degrees Celsius, and then slowly rise it to your next step. You might do a protein rest as well at 50, and then you might raise it to 65 to continue the transformation of those sugars. So that's kind of, again, beer is 4 ingredients. The way you interpret these ingredients, the way you use them, is going to affect the end product greatly.
Yeah, never knew that. Like most of my beer life so far, I thought that the Hefeweizens were mostly yeast driven, and all the aromas like the vanilla and kind of like the bubblegum.
You're entirely correct.
Yeah,
it is 100% yeast driven.
Yeah, okay.
But the way, as brewers, we don't really make beer. We make sugar water called a wort, and the yeast makes the beer.
Yeah.
So our job is to create the perfect environment for that yeast to create the product we want in the end.
Okay.
So for Hefeweizens, it's playing with those mash temperatures. It's also playing with the fermentation temperatures and stressing the yeast in different ways to get those esters out, to get those phenolics, to get those nice Hefeweizen flavors.
So you have to build the perfect sugary water so yeast can drive your beer through fermentation on the target of what you're aiming for the aromas on your Hefeweizens, or like...
Pretty much. Well, it's true for any beer. Same thing with lagers. There's a reason why you're creating, you're mashing at X temperature, and your fermenter is going to be at 12 degrees Celsius, and you're going to try to leave a little more headroom. So you don't want those yeasts to stress. You want them to create a clean fermentation. With Hefeweizens, with Weiss beers, it's kind of the opposite. You want to stress that yeast because you want those esters, those phenolics out. So very yeast driven, also very dependent of wheat in this case. You could not create this without it.
Yeah. One last question, Max.
Yeah, buddy.
Is there some brewers out there that might push the boundaries a little bit further and adding actual cloves, actual spices to kind of pump up those aromas in the beer, or it's completely unallowed in the Hefeweizen category?
Well, if you're following the Reinheitsgebot, then no, you can't add anything to that beer.
Okay.
Same thing with a little style called Hopfenweizen, which is a hoppy version of the Hef, which is technically compliant to the Reinheitsgebot, but it's not really a German style because it's very hoppy.
And also, it's trademarked, so you can't brew it.
Yeah, but I mean, you can still add a bunch of hops to Hefeweizen and stuff.
Confirmed on Twitter by the man. The man that brewed it. You
can always, play around. Oh, yeah, it is what it is. All right. If you like the video, please leave a like, subscribe, share with your friends, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Oh yeah, and let us know what you want to hear next.